All right, so 21 through 24, kind of the home stretch, and let's just kind of dive right in. So 21, I'm looking at 3x squared plus 2 equals 51, and they said solve by taking the square roots, which essentially mean I'm going to get x alone and then move everything over and get rid of the square by square rooting. So let's start with that. To get x alone, I'm going to subtract 2 from each side, and I get 3x squared equals 49, and to get x alone again, I'm going to divide by 3 by each side. And so I get x squared equals 49 over 3, and that's actually as simplified as it's going to get. So what I have to do is now get rid of this square, and the opposite of squaring something is square rooting it. And so if you need to understand, I'm going to say I have a squared, and I want to get it to a. Well, if I square root it, remember that this is the same thing as saying a times a, and then a comes out. So square rooting is the opposite of square, and now we just have to reduce. Don't forget, I still need my little plus and minus. So I'm going to get x equals plus or minus square root of 49 over square root of 3. I decide to split it up because here's the thing. I know square root of 49, perfect square. X ends up equaling plus or minus 7 over square root 3, but however, I can't have a radical in the bottom. It's too cool for school. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to times by square root of 3 over square root of 3. And so I get x equals plus or minus 7 square root 3, because 7 was on my outside and 3 was on my inside. And then I know from proving it in other definitions, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just going to be 3. And that is the most reduced it can get. And so that is your answer. That's solving by taking square roots. And now let's try it again. So I have 22, and it says I have 2x minus 1 squared plus 5 equals 20. Well, again, I kind of want to get the square alone. That's what I'm focusing on. So I'm going to subtract 5 from each side. I'm going to have 2x minus 1 squared equals, well, if I subtract 5 from each side, I get 15. Now, let's get rid of that square. I'm going to square root it. So I get 2x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 15. Again, I still don't have x alone, but I can do that by adding 1 to each side, at least getting that over there. So then I'm going to get 2x equals 1 plus or minus square root of 15. You can have it, honestly, if you want plus or minus square root of 15 plus 1. I just think this looks better. It would be fine either way. And then I'm going to divide by 2 by each side, so I can cross these out, get x alone to equal 1 plus or minus square root 15 all over 2. And that's actually the most simplified it can get. It's okay if it's looking, a little bit weird to you guys, but that's as simplified as it can get. I can't get any more simplified than that. So I'm just going to keep that. Now, solve using quadratic formula. Well, something about the quadratic formula is that, there once was a negative boy who couldn't decide whether to go to a radical party. He decided to be square and missed out on 4 awesome chicks. It was all over by 2 a.m. So this is what x equals. All right, well, 1, you have to have one side equals 0. Oh, look, it already does. That made it really easy for us. So my a value is going to be 2, my b value is going to be negative 3, and my c value is going to be 1, because remember, I'm looking at the equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and that's how I was able to get my a, my b, and my c according to my equation. All right, now hard part done. All you have to do is fill in. So I have x equals a negative boy, which is a negative 3, plus or minus couldn't decide to go to a radical party. He decided to be square, and he missed out on 4 awesome chicks. It was all over by 2 a.m. All right, so now we're just going to be simplifying this even more. So I'm going to have x equals a positive 3, because 2 negatives make a positive, plus or minus, negative 3 squared is 9. And then you get 8, and it's all over 4, okay? Well, 9 minus 8 equals 1, so I end up getting 3 plus or minus square root of 1 over 4. And I know square root of 1 equals 1, so if I were to then write 3 plus or minus square root, not 1, we already decided it's 1 over 4. Now, like we talked about in class, there is kind of something we still have to do. This plus or minus, this means there are two equations, okay? So there's two equations to this, meaning I have to split it up. I'm going to have 3 plus 1 over 4 for one section, 3 minus 1 over 4 for another section. So let's reduce this. That ends up being 4 over 4 on top, and then I end up getting a 1. And then 3 minus 1 is a 2 over 4, and that is reduced to 1/2. So my answers are 1 and 1/2. That is it. Those are your answers. 1 and 1/2. You just have to remember, once you get here, you have to split them up. There are two answers, and you can simplify them even more. Let's move on to something in 24, something that, isn't as easy when I don't have a 0 on my other side. So I'm going to have 3m squared, but, I really need a 0 over here. And the only thing I can do, well, I'm just going to add 6m to each side. I'm going to put everything in order, so it's going to be 3m squared plus 6m minus 2. And now I have that 0. Okay, check. I can do something with that. So I have my a equals 3, my b equals 6, and my c equals -2. All right, so I have my a, b, and c. I can fill it out. I'm going to have a negative boy, right? And my b is going to be a 6 who couldn't decide whether to go to a radical party. He decided to be square, and he missed out on 4 awesome chicks. It was all over by 2 a.m. All right, let's simplify this. Well, I know my -6 will still stay -6, but 6 squared is 36, and 4 times 3 is 12, and then there's a negative, so it's going to be -12. -12 times -2, well, that's a positive 24. All right, that's doable. And that's all over, well, 2 times 3 is 6. So I end up getting -6 plus or minus square root of 60 all over 6. Now, I know 60 can break up. I got 60, which is 6 and 10, and then 10 is 5 and 2, and 6 is 3 and 2. And so if I were to put everything together, I am going to have a 3 times 5 times 2 times 2 all over 6. All right, well, who can come out? My 2's can come out. So then I'm going to get -6 plus or minus 2, and what's left is a 3 and a 5, which means 15. All right, it's still over 6. I am not done. Almost, but not quite. My -6 plus or minus 2, square root of 15 over 6, well, I can actually have a greatest common factor of 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. And remember, you always want to get to the greatest common factor. So I'm going to have a -3 plus or minus, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I don't need to put that, square root of 15 over 3. And that is your final answer. And after all that work, you were able to do that, but that's it. You are now done.